Now I understand you've been deceiving me all along. I want a divorce, and be sure to pay the alimony." My husband said this with a triumphant smile. I, along with my in-laws who were there, were stunned. I had many complaints about my husband, but I still tried hard. I was determined to keep trying for the sake of our son. But now, this person in front of me is blaming us for a baseless charge. I can't stand it anymore. I don't need someone like this in my life. For our future, I'll cut him off. My name is Nancy, a 30-year-old housewife. I live with my husband. I'm pregnant, and my due date is approaching. When we got married, I left my hometown and moved far away so I can't immediately rely on my parents. Even so, my in-laws cared about me and treated me like real family. You often hear about mother-in-law bullying, but I think we were free from such problems. However, I had worries. My worries were about my husband. He comes home quite late for an employee in an ordinary company. Sometimes he gets back after midnight. And when I ask what he was doing, he gives vague excuses like, "Adult male have quite a few stuff to deal with in our own world. Women have responsibilities too, you know." His being like this, I can't rely on him easily. He's often not home when I need help. I have severe morning sickness and sometimes can't move all day. Even then, my husband goes out drinking late. Because I'm a housewife, I handle all the chores, from cooking to laundry and cleaning. On days when I feel bad, I can't do all of these, and often can't even take care of myself. When I'm bedridden and weak, there's no one to help me. The loneliness tears me apart. I know it might be hard to rely on us, but we're on your side, Nancy. Feel free to ask for help anytime. Sometimes my mother-in-law would visit and say this to me. Apparently, I looked quite pale. I was grateful for her words, but even though they were my in-laws, they were still others. I often felt guilty about burdening them too much. In the end, I had no choice but to endure the loneliness and pain on my own. One day, that daily struggle continued. That day, despite feeling awful, I had to take out the trash, so I dragged myself outside. The trash bag felt heavier than usual, as if it was filled with lead. Even so, I had to do it, so I pushed myself. Feeling such, I wasn't watching my step and stumbled over a bump. I couldn't break my fall and fell down. I thought I should get up quickly, but my body wouldn't move. I realized then that I was more exhausted than I thought. The feeling of not wanting to get up overwhelmed me, and I fainted. When I came to, I was in a hospital room. Apparently, a neighbor had called for help, and I was taken to the hospital. The doctor checked my condition, and I was told to stay for 3 days before going home. During that time, my husband didn't visit. When I got home, my husband looked annoyed. As soon as he saw me, he shouted, "Don't be a burden on me, you worthless wife." That single sentence pierced my heart. To him, I was a nuisance, nothing more than garbage. Normally, if a wife collapses, a husband would be concerned. Isn't it normal to ask if she's okay? He didn't visit me even once when I was in the hospital. He had no idea how much anxiety I battled alone. It was then I realized I meant nothing to him, and I realized that I no longer had any love left for my husband. But in my belly, there was a son who knew nothing about what was to come. When he is born, he will need a father figure. We need money to live. Besides, my decision could limit my son's future. Maybe, just maybe, my husband would change once our son was born. Even if he treated me badly, he might show love to our son. I deeply hoped for that and decided not to divorce him. Yet, every night was filled with anxiety. I worried about collapsing again, and the uncertainty of the future, dark feelings swirled in my chest. I gradually became insomniac. Even as I withered away, my husband didn't care. I lived a hellish life, but even so, our son was born safely. Hearing his loud cries in the delivery room, tears of relief and emotion streamed down my face. After so many anxious days, I felt a sense of relief. After that, I stayed in the hospital for a while, but my husband still didn't visit. Even in times like these, work came first for him. I wanted him by my side. However, my in-laws often visited, and sometimes they brought my husband along, so I did see him occasionally. When he was there, he looked very displeased and gave off an "I want to leave immediately" vibe. Seeing this, my mother-in-law scolded him, saying, "You're a father now." But my husband paid no mind. "It's my feelings, don't restrict me," he said, completely ignoring his mother's words. What kind of man is this? Why did I ever fall in love with him? Why did I marry this worthless person? I deeply regretted it. After I returned home, as expected, my husband didn't help with childcare. Even though I no longer had the weight of pregnancy, balancing childcare and housework was more challenging than I had imagined. Our son cried a lot at night, reducing my sleep, and I had no time to rest my tired body. I was fed up. I wanted to escape. One day, my husband said, "I have something to discuss. I want to talk about something important soon. I'd like Mom and Dad to be there too." I was curious about the important discussion, but I agreed since there was no point in refusing. That day, my husband was in a very good mood and kept his phone with him at all times. This made me suspicious and gave me a bad feeling. A few days later, the promised day arrived. The doorbell rang, and my in-laws came up. They seemed to be expecting good news, not knowing the content of the discussion. As we sat down, my husband placed a paper on the table. "Please look at this." We all looked at the paper together. It appeared to be the result of a DNA test. It stated that there was no biological relationship between my husband and our son. "This child is not mine," my husband said, glaring at me. "But my son is definitely my husband's child." Even though I insisted, my husband wouldn't listen. "Now I understand that you've been deceiving me all along. I want a divorce, and be sure to pay the alimony." He said this finally, leaving me stunned. My in-laws also seemed shocked by this unexpected outcome. I thought we could finally have a proper conversation, but then this happened. Sure, my son and I have benefited a lot from my husband's income, but this behavior is unacceptable. At that moment, I decided to take revenge. "Okay, then can I call this hospital to confirm?" When I said this, my husband turned pale. "Even with all this evidence, you still want to fight it?" "I just want to verify if this is real. To me, our son is still yours." From my husband's reaction, I guessed that this test result was probably fake. Ignoring my husband trying to stop me, I called the contact number on the paper. A receptionist responded promptly and checked the records. It turned out that no DNA test had been conducted. My husband shouted, "This must be a mistake," and refused to accept the truth. He kept insisting that I was lying. "She's trying to frame me." He painted me as the villain. I regretted ever thinking I could make things work with this man. I had hoped that having a son would change him. I wanted to believe he would step up as a father. But in reality, that was never going to happen from the beginning. Expecting anything from someone so self-centered was pointless. I felt like I had woken up from a long dream, and I realized that this man was not needed in my life. Now it was my turn to place the documents I had prepared on the table. Seeing the brown envelope I put on the table, my husband and in-laws looked puzzled. "This is evidence of your affair." Hearing this, my husband began to panic. It was obvious he had something to hide. Ignoring him, I took the contents out of the brown envelope. Inside were several photos. They showed my husband getting intimate with another woman. Some even captured them entering and leaving a hotel known for such activities, leaving no room for excuses. I've suspected you for a while, so I had you investigated. I had always doubted my husband. He came home too late for it to be just overtime, and his outings for work suddenly increased. Even so, I was scared to start an investigation, fearing what I might find if he was truly cheating. One day, while my husband was in the shower, his phone, left on the table, buzzed with a message notification. The message was from a woman named Patricia, saying she was looking forward to seeing him again with a heart emoji. I instinctively grabbed his phone. Carelessly, it wasn't locked, and I quickly found what I was looking for. After confirming my husband's affair, I hired a detective agency to investigate him. I had taken photos of the messages on his phone, which were considered sufficient evidence. Soon after, photos of my husband having fun with the woman were taken and handed over to me. "You were deceiving me," my husband shouted angrily, his face red. I retorted, "You're the one who was deceiving me." He tried to argue, saying things like, "This is too much," and "This isn't fair," blaming me. But his words no longer hurt me. My love for this man had already faded. Nothing he said could hurt me anymore. I just wanted this moment to be over. My husband continued to yell, unable to contain his anger. Not opposing him only made him more arrogant. "You can't live without me. You should have just listened to me." As he laughed and mocked me, my father-in-law stood up and shouted, "You stupid son." My in-laws, who had been quietly observing, turned red with anger and confronted my husband. "How could you do something so outrageous? Nancy deserves better." "We didn't raise you to be this kind of person," apologized Nancy. My husband tried to make excuses, saying, "But..." However, when my in-laws shouted, "No excuses," he started to sob and said, "I'm sorry." Encouraged by my in-laws, my husband knelt at my feet. "I'm truly sorry. Please forgive me." The man who had been so arrogant earlier now bowed his head in shame. My in-laws said, "You don't have to forgive him." So I decided not to. "We're getting a divorce, and I'll be asking for alimony. Is that okay?" My husband started to shake his head, but a stern look from my in-laws made him reluctantly agree, "All right." Then my in-laws also knelt and apologized to me. "We're deeply sorry for what our foolish son has done. We'll make sure he makes amends. We're sorry for the pain you've endured for so long. Please, live a happy life from now on." I almost doubted that my in-laws were truly family with this man, as they seemed nothing alike. That man remained kneeling the whole time. I was able to successfully divorce my husband. When I handed him the divorce papers, he signed without any resistance. I had consulted with a lawyer, so we discussed alimony thoroughly. Given the ample evidence and my resulting insomnia, the alimony amount was substantial. I also identified the mistress and demanded compensation from her as well. After that, I returned to my parents' home to spend time leisurely with them. Of course, my son was with me. There was no way I would let my ex-husband have custody. He also agreed to pay child support, which would help raise our son. I had worried for so long, but the end came surprisingly quickly. I secretly regretted not taking action sooner. Later, I heard that my ex-husband was dumped by his mistress. Apparently, the reason he demanded a divorce was that his mistress was pregnant and wanted to marry him. My ex-husband thought he should take responsibility if it was his child, so he chose the mistress after she reported her pregnancy. However, it turned out that the child wasn't his. The mistress had been with other men, and the child likely belonged to one of them. She knew this, but tried to pin the child on my ex-husband to make her life easier. When she realized she'd be sued for alimony, she ran away. My ex-husband had planned to marry her, and the shock was immense. He stopped going to work and started staying at his parents' home. Naturally, my former in-laws couldn't support him. My ex-husband was easily abandoned by them and now lives in a factory dorm, earning a pittance. "I can't take this anymore, please help me." One day, I answered a call from an unknown number, and it was my ex-husband. Apparently, he had borrowed a friend's phone to call. "I realized I can't live without you. I'll change my ways, please. Come back." Hearing his desperate plea, I sighed in exasperation. Can't live without me, huh? Even if I extended a hand now, he would betray me again eventually. My ex-husband was crying and pleading on the other end of the phone. I spoke to him in a cold voice. "Sorry, but I have no intention of getting back together with you. Don't ever contact me again. If you try anything, I'll consult my lawyer again." Hearing this, my ex-husband screamed, "Wait!" But I ignored him and hung up. He called repeatedly from the same number, but I blocked it. I planned to visit a phone shop soon. I was thinking of changing my phone anyway, so maybe this was a good opportunity to get a new one. As for me, I found a job at a company near my parents' home. There's a good daycare within commuting distance, so I leave my son there. On busy work days, I rely on my parents, but my co-workers understand my situation, so I don't stay too late. I can save for the future while spending time with my son. I care deeply for my son. I want to support him wholeheartedly, no matter what path he chooses in the future. If he ever goes astray like his father, I want to do everything I can as his mother. It's wrong to hurt others without a second thought. And it's even worse not to feel remorse for it. Everyone makes mistakes. Surely my son will too. That's why, as a mother, I want to teach him to always be sincere and considerate towards others,